Bink, bink, bink. We haven't done this in a while.
I know.
And we're live.
Just been one of us.
Just the one of us. Doing the Nutritional Edge. Just the one of us. How was it when I was gone?
It was good.
Yeah.
I just kind of monologued about mental health and nutrition. Um,
Nice.
I've been just talking about that because of Mental Health Month. Um,
Uh,
I've been mentioning a few key stuff everywhere I can because I find it so helpful. One is blood sugar management
mm,
because what your blood sugar is doing, your mood and energy follows along. So they go
mm,
hand in hand. So
mm.
when someone's blood sugar dips because they're not eating consistently or they have maybe an underlying condition that their body cannot regulate it properly, that can cause anxiety and worsen the symptoms.
What is that? Just because the drop in blood sugar, like you get like the tingling, kind of start feeling weird stuff, and you panic about it.
Yeah, your body uses adrenaline and cortisol to get it back. It's
Mm.
like a survival mechanism. So, as you can imagine, adrenaline can really have some freaky effects on you and make you feel nervous and jump out of your skin. Um, so yeah, that's why that release of hormones to get your body's blood sugar up. Your body uses these hormones that can also jack up your mood and your energy levels.
I mean, I've always recognized like mobilizing blood sugar, how it can relate to like insulin resistance. But I guess I've never actually really thought about how if we have lower blood sugar, how that can induce these stress hormones. I mean, obviously I knew that,
Yeah, yeah,
um, but as a mechanism for resulting in anxiety or anxiousness or kind of panic,
yeah.
that's actually very. But then but what's in, I guess it must be for people who are like metabolically inflexible because ketones have a calming effect,
Mm,
um, especially when the molecule GABA gets released
yeah.
into the brain. That has a calming effect on our nervous system and our physiology and stuff. But must be for people who are metabolically inflexible that aren't able to kind of get into that realm of like ketosis.
Yeah, probably if that's the case with the ketones, probably people that are more keto adapted. So,
Mm-hmm.
which would make sense in what people typically report. So, if someone is wanting to get in ketosis, um, uh, it can take a few days, and especially to get accustomed and comfortable to that sensation and utilizing that as a fuel source. If they are, let's say, maybe the first day or two, that usually they'll be hungrier, they'll be experience those symptoms of like lower blood sugars as your body is getting accustomed to that. Um, they have more nervousness, anxiety, things like that. Once that stabilizes and they're more keto adapted, which means used to using ketones, a lot of people report feeling really, really good. Like a lot of people feel like they have less inflammation or that their hunger stabilizes and they have all these wonderful like benefits. A lot of people want to do keto for brain health. So I bet that makes sense from what I've heard people experience when they go through that. So maybe that initial phase is tough, or like you mentioned, people that have metabolic inflexibility. So that's most common in people that either have been diagnosed with diabetes or have not yet been diagnosed, but it's right around the corner. So low blood sugars, so less than 70 like milligrams per deciliter, is a sign of a potential type 2 diabetes diagnosis around the corner. So it definitely puts someone at risk.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, there's a new keto drink coming out, or
Yeah.
it's been out, and you can consume it regardless if you're in like a ketosis state or not. But it's just ketone type fuel.
Yeah.
And from what I've learned is that people like human energy sources are the preferred energy source is ketones, not necessarily glucose. It's like a cleaner, more sustainable fuel, I guess, and it can also help clean up our cells and mitochondria. Um, I typically feel pretty good when I'm in a state of like a fasted state of ketosis
Mhm.
and don't necessarily get like crazy. I mean, I'm definitely keto adapted
Right, right.
from doing fasts, and I
Yeah.
think the longest one I've done this year is just 40. I haven't done a 3 day one or a 4 or 5 day one,
Yeah.
which is probably a good thing.
That was a tough one. What's the longest one you've done?
It was 115 hours. That was almost a year ago. Yeah, it was 115 hours, and I had electrolytes during it and my water, and that was the only thing that I had. So I pretty much had to learn to like the stuff that would calm me down when I started getting kind of like like shaking stuff or like losing focus. Water was critical,
Yeah.
critical. Getting out in the sun helped calm me down. Reading helped. Walking barefoot. Um,
Mhm.
it was taking cold water exposure. Those doing breath work. Those are probably the main things that helped me get through that 115 hours.
Yeah.
And I still exercise every morning
Mm.
during that.
Wow.
So can't I remember I started on a Sunday. Sunday was my last meal. Then I ate on Friday, and then Wednesday, Cam was like, "Dude, you're looking good." Like honestly, I can't even tell that like that you're 72 some hours faster. Then Thursday came around. He's all like, "I can see it in your face." He's like, I was kind of like irritable and stuff, and
Mhm.
during I was like, "Dude, I need to get checked." And I ended up getting adjusted. And I was like, "Back to business." And
Mm.
I was gonna hike Pinnacle that Friday. Then there was a gnarly lightning storm going on.
Mm.
As I'm in the forest hiking, I was gonna make myself go up the east side, and it was a gnarly forest. I sat on the bench, and then it was like a really close, bright bolt of lightning. I was like, okay, now I'm going back home, and I'm eating,
Yeah.
and I'm done.
Were you just trying to go as long as you could, or did you have a set
No,
hour?
my set time was 5 days, so it was like it was going to be 100, 24 times 5, which I think is 120 hours. And I was just back home at 115 hours. I was like, nah, I'm gonna eat. I'm not gonna wait till 2 p.m. or 12 p.m. today to eat. I was like, I'm ready. I made my food. I'm ready to go.
Mm.
So
Pioneering ahead for us so that we can just watch what it looks like for a 115-hour fast. We call that biohacking, seeing what we can do to be healthier and increase longevity.
yeah, it's gnarly. It's tough, but yeah, no, I mean, with both of us being back, let's see, what have I gone in? Last week was a pretty short one. I only went like 10 minutes or so, but the one before that, I had a nice, good flow. Going in on like the nervous system's role with the
Yeah.
quality of your mind, the well-being of your mind, and kind of the big main concept between like mental wellness and mental health. I think that the
Mm.
word mental health, I'm not a big fan of it because people associate all the negatives with it,
Mm. Yeah.
and there's a really like just ill connotation when you hear that. It's almost like
Mm.
oh, I don't really want to talk about that. Like someone's mind isn't good, not having good positive thoughts, and they can't get out of it. They're stuck in victimhood or whatever, or people who are just like stuck in like being anxious or depressed. And
Mm.
we focus a lot on like what to do to just like for an unwell mind, what to kind of mitigate versus like what actually makes a mind well. So I was kind of
Yeah.
focusing on like what makes a mind well and just pulling pieces into that. It could be a good flow um, to kind of go in on how food plays a role. That was actually cool with the blood sugar.
Yeah. What's we got to have Masson or another great therapist on here one of these days. That'll be fun to talk about the
Mm-hmm.
interplay of mental health and
Mm.
yeah, I'd love to ask more about their opinions on like diagnoses because
Mm.
we have all these definitions around, and I wonder if that's helpful or hurtful or harmful. Obviously, like insurance and places need some type of diagnosis, but then people get labeled with something, a mental health issue. But we're all on a spectrum at any time, any given time, and sometimes I wonder if we're a little bit too quick to put someone in a box, label them with ADHD or depression or whatever it is. And
Totally.
that's, you know, it can
Totally.
be negative.
It's like if you're having a tough time focusing or sitting still, you get labeled ADHD, especially as a
Yes.
kid. And like kids
Mhm.
aren't meant to sit still and focus. They're meant to go and run around and play. So kids get labeled with it way too early. And
Yeah.
then with depression, typically like you're just in a period of like grief or sadness,
Yeah.
or primarily probably having a victim mindset.
Mm.
I think a couple of main issues that cause depression or pain, actual body pain, that prevents you from doing the things you want to do, or having needs that don't get met,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
also are in conjunction with if you want and need to go play and move your body around, but your body hurts and you can't do it, then yeah, you're gonna get sad about it. But
Yeah.
the process that occurs when diagnosing depression or anxiety, um, it's almost like there's no gap between the person and their identity and the
Yeah.
condition. So therefore, they just embody it versus happening like a separation from it, where it's like, oh, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling anxious. They just say, I am depressed, therefore I need
Right.
meds.
Yeah. Yeah. What we say about ourselves in our own head or out loud can make a huge difference. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I'm always listening for in my sessions is change talk, behavior change talk, which comes from motivational interviewing, which is a concept to where rather than taking the expert method where, I'm the one that needs to talk, patient needs to listen, it completely flips it on its head. And I'm helping to guide someone. I'm listening, I'm guiding. I'm very rarely directing, which is just stating, hey, you've got to do this. A lot more listening, a lot more guiding. And listening for change talk, which are statements like, I need to work out more. That would be a statement. Or I got a gym membership and I'm planning to do this. Or I walked for 2 miles and want to go for 5. So it's things like that, statements like that, show that someone's on the right track. They're already starting to change or they're thinking about change. The more we state positive statements like that, the more likely we're going to follow through with our goals and be successful. Versus me saying, hey, you've got to walk this far. You got to do this. You got to eat these foods. What that gives the client is the negative opportunity of saying, well, I don't know that I can. They just said a negative statement. I don't think I can. Or yeah, I probably should, but I have this and this excuse, and becomes really hard. And so just by flipping their I don't or I can't statements to I'm planning to or I need to, it makes all the difference with whether they're successful or not.
Mm-hmm. So you're encouraging them to like look at their language that they're utilizing.
I don't talk about like motivational interviewing. It's more about doing it. Like if I start,
Mm-hmm.
like you could talk about it, but it's almost like it's something I am doing unspoken. Like it's an unspoken thing I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that can be the same thing with other types of approaches, like nervous system / trauma system informed or trauma informed care has to do
Mm-hmm.
with noticing someone's nervous system and knowing about their history so that way you don't re-traumatize them. And how do you make them calm and feel safe? Because we don't really make changes and we're not very curious and we don't really explore much if we feel unsafe. And that could mean like unsafe could be um, someone that is zoned out because they don't think that they can make health changes. So they're immediately thinking about their past experiences. So they're not in the present moment. They're not feeling like, okay, we're in the present moment. We're talking about change. They're thinking about how all of their other approaches did not work, and they're not even in the moment. And so you've got to get someone into the present moment for them to go further and change. So in order to do that, I'm not usually saying, "Hey, I'm making you feel comfortable." I'm usually I'm doing eye contact, calm voice, pauses, listening, and subconsciously they're feeling more secure. But I know what I'm doing, kind of like behind the scenes in my head. I'm thinking that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make them feel more comfortable and safe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What are foods role, eating habits role in the quality of people's mind?
Well, I was talking about a few different supplements recently. One that I'm really impressed by the research on is creatine, not just for muscles, but also for the gut and also for the brain.
I would love
Creatine,
to hear more about that.
yeah,
I take
creatine
creatine.
monohydrate. That is
Yep.
it's a supplement that people almost always think of for athletes. That can help recycle ATP. ATP is what we use for energy. And so if we can recycle it better, we use creatine to do that, then we will be able to support the organs in our body that demand a lot of energy. Our brain is one of those. It is the organ that takes the most amount of energy. In fact, talking about carbs and ketones, if someone's not keto adapted, they're going to use about 50% of their carbs that they eat. So all the bread or pasta or rice or fruits and vegetables that they're eating, about half is going to be used by the brain. You can just imagine that your little brain sitting up there, and then you got the rest of your body taking up the other half. That just surface area wise shows you how much the brain uses. So it's an energy hog.
Oh yeah.
So that means if you want potentially better cognition and mental health, um, a creatine supplement could help. I always think about creatine supplements for people that are not eating a lot of meat, like purposefully or for some other issue. If you're not eating meat or animal products, then you're not gaining creatine from your diet. You don't have to. Your body has creatine. And it can utilize it without you getting it from food. But it's optimal if you can get some from food. So if someone's not eating animal protein on a regular basis, then I think they're especially vulnerable for being deficient in creatine. Um, Someone can be eating meat and still take a creatine supplement, but they're going to get some already from their food.
So you're saying that that part of the reason we want and ought to take creatine is because it is recycling ATP, which is the energy storage or like additional one of the energy sites for our cells.
Yeah.
And since our brain consumes 50% of the energy that is created in our body, um, creatine will help replenish those stores as our brain continues to churn through the ATP that our cells create. Is that correct?
That sounds like a Chat GPT summary. That was very impressive. Yeah. That's a lot when you put it that way. That's good. I was like, dang, unbroken, no ums. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Chris, the AI bot.
Connect my dots because I know. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, because I know that that creatine for muscles it utilizes an additional. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It's an adenosine molecule that has three phosphates attached to it. And when we churn up energy, we lose one of those phosphates. So
Exactly.
what creatine does is creatine provides that third phosphate and can just basically it's just floating around as like a storage. And when a muscle cell, myocyte, needs energy and ATP to contract, but it only has an ADP, it can do a conversion with the creatine monophosphate to get that phosphate and thus be able to use energy in the muscle cell itself.
Right.
So my initial understanding of creatine was actually more for it gets utilized. That energy pathway gets utilized in like sprint type work or speed work or max exertion. That's when that storage gets used or depleted, and then you have to switch to like oxidative phosphorylation or
Mm.
anaerobic, aerobic, whatever.
Yeah.
But the brain concept is interesting, and that also kind of makes sense for gut because
Hmm. Yeah.
our gut, it utilizes, since we go through basically have a new gut lining every 3 days, a new gut tube. It takes a lot of energy in order to recreate and repopulate those cells. And our gut actually is like 66% of the protein that we intake goes towards relining our gut.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah.
what you had mentioned about organs that are using up the most energy, I
Yeah.
think brain and gut are got to be top two. Kidneys probably up there as well. Kidneys are constantly working.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Absolutely. The gut, like you said, replenishing the gut lining cells constantly. And so if it takes 3 days, think about red blood cells that can live up to like 120 days, much less
mm,
cell turnover than our gut lining.
mhm.
I don't know about our brain cells. Like, do you know the turnover or how that works? How quickly those are?
Well, I mean, the reboot for a brain cell is not good. um,
Right.
we can create new neurons,
Right.
regardless of our age. So it is capable to create new neurons. But for the most part, we lose a lot more than what we're able to recreate.
Right.
We
There's a
we
difference.
lose more at a faster rate than what
Mm.
we're able to recreate. And typically, in order for us to recreate something, we have to do something that we don't normally do. So it's almost like learning a new pathway or learning a new thing or pushing your body or mind to a new limit, new
Mm.
threshold, find an edge. That's where you're going to actually get those neurons being recreated.
Right.
And it's really easy to kill neurons. I mean, all you gotta do is just smoke some cigarettes and drink a few beers, and you're gonna start killing off cells left and right.
Yeah.
So that's pretty easy. Um,
So are we like, if the cell turnover is not the same process exactly as other cells, um, how does that work exactly? Are we, as we develop, and supposedly by about age 25, we've developed like most of our brain cells and I guess neurons, synapse connections. Well, I guess connections can always be made, but most of our brain development by age 25 are like, do those cells live until we die, except for the ones that die, or is there actually still like do do those cells die off when we create new ones, or those just have the same cells for those years, or
for the most part, I believe a lot of those cells do come from birth.
yeah.
And what's developing are the connections, are the neuronal
Mm.
connections, are the
Right.
pathways, especially in our cerebellum,
Mm.
because our cerebellum is like that unconscious movement or behaviors or habits. A lot of that's from our cerebellum, and creating those patterns, like in our cortex, and also the sensory stuff, and in our sensory cortex. That is what is getting developed. It's like the memory of it and like the understanding. Like, okay, like I see this thing. I know what I have to do with this. Um, and so we actually, for the most part, we used to actually think that we would just lose brain cells
Right.
as time would go on. We
Mhm.
do bad things, they just kill them off, and it's pretty
Yeah.
easy to kill off a brain cell.
Yeah.
Actually, really easy to kill off a brain cell,
Yeah.
and for the most part, we don't really do the things to get them back. And really, when it comes to like organ death,
Mm.
and organ death is not necessarily the like loss of the loss of actual totalitarian function of that organ. It's like this, it's the decline in function. A lot of that is we're having non-functional cells in a space that needs functional cells.
Yeah.
And a lot of that originates in our brain because it's not able to communicate to our body to allocate the proper blood flow and nerve flow to the organ that might needs recovery and healing. That's also part of why we need 8 hours of sleep a night. That's how long it takes the little janitors in our brain called microglial cells. That's how long it takes them to clean up scar tissue and metabolic waste products that have accumulated in our brain from the day before in order to prepare our brain for the day that we're about to have. That is part of why everyone says you need 8 hours of sleep. Most people don't actually haven't put two and two together, but that's how long it takes those guys to clean up our metabolic waste products in our brain.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's definitely got me thinking a lot about what you do and your nervous system scans. And have you heard of Dr. Amen before?
No.
Okay. He does this thing. He's got some interesting TED Talks. Some of my clients take his supplements. So I've looked into his stuff. He's a neurologist, neuroscientist. I don't know, maybe both. He does these brain scans and believes very strongly that people should evaluate the actual functioning of the brain in the field of mental health, because there seems to be this disconnect with psychiatrists are really maybe the only doctor that doesn't evaluate the organ that they're treating. So in a sense, if your brain and your nervous system have a lot to do with your mental health, they're not really checking anything so much. It's more subjective, so it makes their jobs maybe a bit harder than a cardiologist who can go in and look at the heart. But by evaluating the brain, that can potentially be helpful. So when you are doing your nervous system scans and adjustments and helping patients, if they can't recreate a lot of cells that they've lost, they can regain function with improved nerve flow and circulation and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the primary source of blood to our brain has to travel through the top two bones of the neck. In addition, that's also how it's going to be communicating with the rest of our body. It's through our brain stem. Our brain stem is actually older than our brain. That's the most primitive thing. When we go into a coma, it's an area in our brainstem that's getting activated. That's basically saying we need to shut everything down in order to preserve basic life functions. And so in a coma, the only thing that's actually functioning during a coma is our brainstem. So it shuts the brain off. It shuts the conscious brain off. Therefore, we don't have any motor control, or we're not awake or anything like that. But the basic life functions of breathing and respiration and heartbeat, that's all dictated by our brain stem. So our brain stem is the underlying chief that's coordinating everything. And if our brain stem is under stress due to an imbalance of neurologic input from muscles in the upper neck, due to one being hypertonic, one being hypotonic, so more tone, less tone, more tight, less tight, due to a misalignment of the upper neck, that will put the brainstem in a stress state. The brainstem perceives that neurologic imbalance as stress, and that fires up our emotional mood behavior site in our brain called our limbic system, more specifically our amygdala. So it'll immediately turn that area on and increase metabolism and activity in that area. So it's going to draw in more nutrients, and it's almost kind of like a muscle. It's going to start getting worked more. And as that occurs, when our amygdala is activated, it will inhibit activity of our frontal cortex. So our frontal cortex is where we're actually able to make cognitive decisions, make executive decisions, learn things, have memory, think calmly, think clearly, think logically. Our amygdala will inhibit that. And by doing so, it will also shunt blood flow away from it, nerve flow away from it. So we're having decrease in activity of it and decrease in activation of it. Now, on the flip side, if when I make a correction of someone, when I adjust somebody, there are studies out there that show an increase in uh, prefrontal cortex activity pre-post adjustment. And there are neuronal connections now. It's been established there are neuronal connections from an upper cervical adjustment and activation of the prefrontal cortex, which works the same way and will therefore inhibit the amygdala. So then our fear, anxiety, stress response center will decrease in size, decline in metabolism, and then we stop being as anxious as much. So that's like the actual physiologic connection between what I'm doing and people's mental well-being.
Nice. You got me thinking about The Walking Dead and in all these zombie apocalypse movies where only the brainstem basically is functioning. It's like only our id or maybe our amygdala and brainstem. So
that's it.
It's a little scary because then zombies do not have executive functioning decisions, and we might be walking around like kind of tired semi-zombies a lot of the time. I don't know. I feel that on Mondays for sure. The jet lag getting back. Feel like a semi-zombie.
Absolutely. Oh, I bet. Yeah. Yeah, you just gotta knock them in the brainstem and then those zombies dead.
It's important. It's crucial.
Yeah, it is.
You ever watch The Walking Dead?
No,
I gave up after a few seasons in.
I just finished Game of Thrones, and there are dead people in Game of Thrones. So
Spoiler.
I got enough zombies in there. Yeah, big spoiler.
The first episode. That's the first scene.
Yeah, literally.
Nice. Good.
But yeah, well, this was a good show. Do you have anything else you want to go in on?
I don't think so. I think that is really good.
I'm feeling pretty content right now.
Yeah. We had it's been a while since we got to talk about the science of things, and now we just unloaded.
It's not often we get to go just straight clinician mode for a little bit and actually get to talk about all the stuff we know. Typically, we have to talk in third grade terms and not get to use the big words that we learned in science class. So it's always nice to be able to keep that language fresh.
Yeah, I would forget most of the things I know if I didn't find an avenue for remembering. And like you reminding me of things too, just talking about like ATP and creatine recycling, the phosphate and ADP. I'm like, I knew that kind of, but I could not put words to it as eloquent. So cool. So next,
I'm glad I had eloquent words.
You did. Next Thursday will be last week of Mental Health Month, and then June has a couple things, including Men's Health Month, migraine awareness, at least week. I'm not sure it's a whole month, but yeah, got some good stuff coming up in June.
Nice. We're dialed in. Oh yeah, June's gonna be a good one. Heck yeah. Let's go. Well, I'm gonna click end stream.
Sounds
we're
great.
Gonna sign off. And thanks for those tuning in, and for those that are watching recording, thanks for learning with us. Happy Nutritional Edge Day. See ya.